So good morning, everybody. A little bit of a grey Wednesday morning today, but delighted for you to join me. And I'm Lisa Barnwell, and this is Bumps in the Boardroom, a global conversation on the pregnancy advantage for business. And just before we get on to our guest for today, who is Geraldine Gallacher, I just wanted to give a little recap on what is Bumps in the Boardroom and what has inspired me to set up this event. So it's a week-long event. We have 12 speakers, 12 experts over 7 days, and it's a free online event for anybody to register and join in with. And it's really to start a conversation on the pregnancy advantage for business, the advantage that I see that women bring when they actually are having a baby and when they've had their baby and come back to the workplace. So I know that this is perhaps a new concept to many people. Pregnancy is not viewed as something that's really beneficial in the workplace, and this is something that I would really like to see change. So I've brought together a number of experts who have various different opinions on this and some scientific research, and it's something that I think we can really give a different look at, because I think we're really undervaluing this great resource that we have. And each day I'm referring to a book that has inspired me to really look at this area. And today I was going to mention a book called Right Time Baby, The Complete Guide to Later Motherhood, by a lady called Claudia Sfar. I hope that's the right pronunciation of her name. She's an ex-BBC and Swiss radio and TV journalist. And Claudia was the foreign correspondent for Swiss National TV based in London before she moved to Cambodia to research the novel She Nomads, and now she has a Spanish partner and they've set up a yoga and healing resort in Goa. So she's had a very interesting time coming to motherhood, and her book was written with the one main goal: to empower women to embrace motherhood positively regardless of their age. And the guide is very much asking, are you ready? And that's a question that I ask a lot of my clients when they're coming to me with their pregnancy before they give birth. And one thing that she mentions in her very first chapter, which I thought was interesting, was how will a baby affect my career? And she gives the statistic that one third of women will be taking paid maternity leave and won't return to work. And the main reason they feel is because they're unable to work suitable hours. And it states there's no surprise that countries like Sweden and Norway, where there are decent maternity and paternity packages, this is her words, have the highest birth rates in Europe. And I know from my personal experience in working with women from these countries, there is a far more embracing and understanding attitude to pregnancy, slowing down, taking time for birth preparation, leading often to an easier birth experience and better recovery, is something that I have seen a lot of, and especially when I've worked with clients from those countries. So certainly working in London, the trend is for women to focus on their career initially over and above having a family. And I see a real fear in many women as they passionately want a family and have the clock ticking, but they also love their career and their independence and their interest and the fulfillment it brings. So many of my clients tell me that they hang on to staying at work after they have mentally checked out. And this is partly to maximise the time post-birth with their baby, but also because they feel there's a really competitive nature at work, often from the women, to stay standing as long as possible. And it's as if it's some kind of achievement not to succumb to nature and the changes that are taking place. So this is something that I discussed in my talk yesterday with Dr. Victoria Bourne, the changes in the brain that we need to look at, because we mainly focus on the physical aspects at the moment. But I really believe if we understood pregnancy and could see the changes it brings in a more positive light, especially in our relation to our mind and our creativity, both individuals and corporations would be more embracing. So it's on that note that I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Geraldine Gallacher. Geraldine is the founder and managing director of Executive Coaching Consultancy, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more about her background and how she got into it. But welcome very much today, Geraldine.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Delightful to be here, as you say, on this grey day.
Exactly, grey day in London, but sunny in our hearts.
Yeah.
So that's what I like to think. So just tell me a little bit, Geraldine, about how you got into coaching and started up ECC.
Well, actually, believe it or not, it's actually 20 years this month that
Wow,
I started. Yes, it's our anniversary. We're going to have a big 21st party, we decided.
fantastic.
So yes, it's 20 years this month that I started executive coaching, and we've changed quite a bit since then. Apart from the fact anything, it was just me at the beginning, and now there's a lot more than me, and also over the last 10 years, we've become much more focused on the women's career journey. And so a lot of our coaching in particular is around the maternity transition, hence my
Mhm.
interest in what you're doing, Lisa.
Great. And you set up a separate sort of maternity coaching division, is that right? A few years ago as well.
Well, that sounds rather grand, a separate division, but we certainly attract different coaches for the maternity coaching as we have for the executive coaching. One of the things, for example, a lot of the coaches are mums, and so they've got interested in specialising in this type of coaching, maternity coaching, because they themselves have been through that transition, which, funnily enough, it's the one area of coaching whenever someone asks me, it's the one area of coaching they always ask me, are you a mum as soon as I meet them. Whereas, chief executives I'm coaching don't ask me if I've been a chief executive. So it's one of those funny things.
It is, it is. And I must admit, actually, I'm not a mum yet. And for a lot of my clients, I think that helps them, feel that I can relate to them where they are, and I've seen the journey so many times that I can support them with that. But actually, because I'm still on the edge myself, I can really relate to a lot of the fears and the anxieties
Yes.
and the excitement as well that they have. But certainly I can relate to that side of things for sure. So, yeah. So you've been working in coaching for a while, and you work with a lot of corporates. Obviously, in London, we tend to be pretty career orientated. We love our careers, and we're very focused on that. And what sort of challenges do you notice that are coming up for the women that you're seeing?
Well, we mainly work with city bankers and city lawyers, and so the challenges are working in a very male-oriented field. So becoming pregnant, it becomes, I think, more difficult when you're working in a field where it's predominantly men. And so, for example, with lawyers, I'm sure you know the statistics, but 62% of the intake is female. And then by the time it gets to partner, there's only 15% females at partner level. So there's this dreadful exodus really that happens. And of course, it happens around maternity, although I think the thought process starts earlier than maternity. The thought process for women to leave starts earlier, and I think that's quite key for companies, is to recognise that they need to actually start addressing how attractive they are as employers to women earlier on, and not just wait till maternity transition when, quite honestly, it's almost a bit too late.
Because do you think women sort of see in the back of their mind, look, there's no way I'm going to be able to juggle, this level of my career with having a family, and I can't do both, so I'm going to choose one, and the one tends to be the family.
I think that's right. I think they're often thinking in too binary a way, which is it's career or family. And whereas actually women, for example, myself, my age, when you look back, it was tough at the time, but in actual fact, rather than see it as so much of a T-junction, it was more of a kind of chicane in the road. And so a lot of what we try to do is we try as coaches to help women to stay in the workplace, actually, because it will get easier. But not to underestimate how hard it is actually to do both. Some of these quite extreme jobs, and I think being a lawyer, in corporate law particularly, is really tough when you've got less time.
Definitely, and I think something that was interesting for me that has come up in a couple of my previous talks on Monday evening with Julie Wells. She's a creative intuitive and talked very much. She's had a number of pregnancies herself as well, and then Victoria Bourne yesterday, Dr. Victoria Bourne, who's been doing a lot of research. Both of them said that you have a heightened level of sensitivity during your pregnancy, which makes you far more alert to danger, and the sort of evolutionary process of that is to obviously protect your young,
Mm.
to make you very aware. But when you're working in a more male-dominated environment where it tends to be perhaps a little bit more aggressive, there's more of that testosterone and that sort of bullish moving forward, that can actually seem quite terrifying. And whereas you've been able to hold your own pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy you become much softer and much more vulnerable, but also much more acutely aware, and so you perceive this sort of behaviour as quite dangerous, as quite threatening, and just quite uncomfortable. I think we've got the rationality now that we can understand it, but something certainly that Victoria's been looking at is facial recognition and how we evolve, and how different levels of hormones will affect our perception of facial awareness. So she said, you know, there's a real spike they've identified during pregnancy that happens, so that, you know, you can be in a meeting where it's getting quite heated, and that will actually feel incredibly uncomfortable for a pregnant woman, way more so than she may have been expecting. You know, and because I think we perhaps don't embrace that and understand it, showing our emotions at work isn't something that's really welcomed.
No.
You know, we're all to keep a lid on it. You know, I think that makes it a really challenging time.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that about the pregnancy period, because one of the things you asked me to introduce was this model that we use, which is called VAST, which is a very unfortunate acronym for a pregnancy model. And that genuinely was just unfortunate. We came up with a model which is the different phases for women are, firstly, vigilance. So that's what you're describing during pregnancy. You become extra vigilant. Then when you have had the child, the baby, then we describe this phase as the appreciation phase. And it's twofold, that appreciation. Well, it's multifaceted, but the two aspects that interest us are, one, that you appreciate the baby, which is wonderful. And we do find with the women we coach who are first-time mothers, that when we meet them in the workplace when they're pregnant, they almost are thinking of having the baby as a task, that they're just going to tick off the things to do list, and they really don't appreciate what a dramatic impact it's going to have on them. And there's nothing we can do actually as coaches to prepare them for that, we've found. So it's one of those things we know that we have to wait and see how that affects them. So the appreciation phase is very much about the appreciation that things have changed quite dramatically. And then the next phase is when they're off on maternity leave, is the prospect of separation. Yeah. And actually we think of that separation as being the prospect of being separate from your child when you go back to work. But it's also the separation, and for us it covers the separation of the job and the home life, which becomes an issue. And we try to encourage people to see it more as a kind of job work-life integration rather than, you know, balance, which balance I think gives the impression one's over there and one's over there. When in fact integration gets across the fact that nowadays we do tend to do everything all, you know, merged into one. And then the final phase of our model that we're referring to, the final T in VAST, is trial. And for us, we try and encourage employers to recognize these two phases in particular, the vigilance phase and the trial phase, because what I think employers don't see is that actually very often women coming back to work, there's a huge opportunity cost to coming back to work, which is that they have a child at home that really, really loves them and wants them to be there. Well, really loves them. I guess they can't express that too much at that age. And they're actually trying out this new existence, which is wearing two hats. You know, it's about being a mother and also, you know, continuing to be an employee. And that's the, in a way, organisations, I think, misinterpret that phase, and if anything they think they're putting women on trial to see how if they can continue, when in fact I think they need to recognise it's actually quite often the other way around. And although our maternity coaching, we can massively increase retention rates, really can, further down the line you're having an impact on whether they'll stay long term, the way you handle them around the maternity transition. And I think people have no awareness of how important that transition is and the impact it has on women in terms of their preparedness to remain with the company.
Absolutely, and I totally agree. And I think, when you explained to me your VAST model initially, I just thought, this really is a fantastic way of looking at it, and a great structure to work through, and a great way to coach the employers really into
Yeah,
how to look after their staff. Because I hear this all the time. Obviously, your end clients are generally the corporates. You're working with them. I'm working directly with the clients, so they're very open, they're very honest, and they really share their feelings about, how they are through this transition process. And one thing that Victoria highlighted yesterday with the hormonal shift and the change in the brain is that, this was what really sort of inspired me with this conference, is that the pregnancy brain really does slow down. It does change. So we've got the left and right hemisphere, and we obviously know that, the left is more for the logical, the detail language, and the right is more for the intuitive sort of side, the creative side. And in pregnancy, there was a real peak sort of 3 months prior, and a change in the brain, so that actually the hormone levels slow down. So we laugh and joke about pregnancy brain, but it's a real fact where the brain is shifting, and it's allowing a more creative and more sensitive side to develop. And we believe that now to prepare for motherhood, but we don't allow for that. If you're working in a corporate environment, I had a client yesterday who's pregnant, and she said to me, I'm going 2 weeks before my due date. And I said to her, well, it's her second baby, and she's got a very supportive working environment, and she's going to come on and talk to me actually later this week. But she said to me, I'm only doing that because I feel there are certain days when I can pull back, when I can share with them that actually I'm not going to be able to come in today or whatever. But I said to her, in terms of your brain function, there's a time when your brain is really kind of checking out of that logic and that detail, and it's trying to get more into that mothering side.
yeah,
And we do all the preparation for antenatal classes to teach you how to give birth. We teach you how to care for your baby, and we do pregnancy yoga, which I'm a teacher of, to encourage the sort of physical side. But we don't actually say, what, your brain is changing, and actually you need to allow this transition. And I know myself from going through transition processes very abruptly, very jaggedly, and not having the space and time, and then doing it differently another time where I allowed that, and it was a completely different process. It wasn't easy peasy the second time, but it was much, much smoother. And I think that's the key thing that I would love to work with you on getting to corporates for, getting the message across, that actually those are the really key times. And actually when you connect with your women at that time, there's a massive loyalty and a massive sort of trust that can develop. And I really feel that's where we're missing the trick. That's where we're getting it wrong.
I think so. But Lisa, we're so far away from it. You're absolutely right what you said earlier on about women working right up till they have the baby, and even the women have a sense of pride of that. It's not. I mean, a lot of it is they feel they have to demonstrate that nothing's changed. And that, of course, is clearly nonsense, because they're physically very much changed, and in actual fact, we notice, and they notice, they report to us that the bigger they get, ironically, the more they get ignored.
The more invisible they
The more
become.
invisible they become, and so this is a really strange feeling as a woman. You're becoming bigger, and then coupled with that, and being ignored, and coupled with that, you're absolutely right, the left brain accuracy, all that detail, logic, etc. They do talk about feeling that they've got a cabbage brain. But I think it's very interesting what you say, or Victoria says as well, about the neuroscience of this. It's recognizing that actually it's an opportunity to click into the other side of the brain, which I think that intuitive side and the creative side is going to be really important going forward, because very often a lot of the problems I see with females in general coaching is that they do rely on a kind of form of conscientiousness and ticking all the boxes and being a good girl to succeed in the workplace, when in actual fact you run out of that being a successful modus operandi, in your kind of early to mid 30s, because once you start having to delegate, and once you have to start networking and understanding how the power moves around in an organization, you really need to be attuned and clicking into that other side, to be a bit more big picture to help you. And I think women don't always engage with that as much as I think they ought to, in terms of to become more successful. I think actually very often they're still relying on being thorough, when in actual fact a lot of very successful people in organizations in which I coach, the people running things are not necessarily thorough at all.
No, I think they're very creative. They're very open. They're doing a lot by gut instinct, and they're doing a lot by sort of just feeling intuitively this is the right thing. And I know from, reading about, lots of successful entrepreneurs, male and female, this is something very much that they highlight. But as you say, on a sort of way up, we think it's about being conscientious and diligent. And actually, women have an amazing gift when they're pregnant, and in that early postnatal period, to really open up to this massive portal of creativity, to really connect with just ideas that seem to come out of nowhere, and to really be far more open to kind of blue sky thinking and problem solving. And I've had clients who've said to me, when they've worked in a more flexible environment, that's how they have been seen, and those are the traits that were able to come forward. And later this week I've got a couple of really successful female entrepreneurs who, one of them thought very carefully about her pregnancy, planned it, years in advance, and created a scenario and setup for herself and her husband so that she could have this flexibility during this time. And what's come out of it has been absolutely staggering. I mean, the success in her business, and the way that it's moving forward has been phenomenal. And she's now looking at things from a much bigger perspective. She said, I'm now looking, sort of 20 years ahead, as opposed to looking just 3 or 4, 5 years ahead. I'm really, involved in what I'm doing. I've got such commitment to it all, and I'm interested in the world as a whole. So, I think there's a massive shift that takes place. And I feel like if we were able to give that space and to hold it, and my experience of coaching and for the work that I do, is a lot of what we do is about holding that space. Yeah. It's about asking the right questions so that, the individual can find the answers. And I feel that...
I agree with you there that I think women are in a position to open up a bit and see more what's going on. And I think maternity actually really helps them to do that, because it's some time out of the workplace where they're actually really looking around. And very often, I know from personal experience, I discovered my local community. I knew how long it took to walk to High Road, where I previously had never actually walked to Chiswick High Road from where I live, and it's 10 minutes away. So you actually begin to notice the world around you. And I think what that does is it makes women think, oh goodness, this is an alternative world, and therefore I'm not sure I want to go back to that other world which seemed so different. And so I'm very keen to help, and we all are as coaches, we're very keen to help women think about this phase, but not to make rash decisions and jump straight out of the workforce thinking that actually what they want to do is, for example, set up a company that sells baby-related products, which is, a lot of the women we coach say that would be their ideal. When in actual fact, many of the lawyers that I coach who are marvellous, at lawyering, I don't think that would be particularly suitable for them at all, actually. And in fact, they might not get the intellectual challenge that they get at the moment, as they get at the moment in the big city law firms and the people that they're meeting. So, I'm very much for trying to persuade women that this is a phase and it's brilliant to embrace it, but not to change your life at this stage because you think you've gone off corporate life. Because I'm hugely conscious of women at a later stage when children go to school, secondary school really, and the teenagers become much more independent. I think I certainly have met many women that struggle to get unpaid non-executive director work that have previously had phenomenal careers, but because they did give up during bringing up, raising their children, they find it incredibly difficult to get back into any form of employment. And that's a real tricky phase for a woman then, because she has taken on a new identity, and I think it's very fulfilling raising children, and it's very, very busy. And if they haven't, and usually they couple that with some kind of work as well, so it's not that they've completely stopped work, but they haven't perhaps worked in the same kind of corporate environment, and then they think, you know, it'd be quite nice to get back into that, and it's very hard to do.
Exactly. I think that's the thing. When you step out of something so dramatically, you know, the transition back can seem a real challenge. But I think this is what I support as well. And I've got another speaker coming on who's setting up it's called 2 to 3 days, and it's all about, you know, helping women transition back into the workplace at senior levels, but in a part-time way. So that will be an interesting conversation. But I think, you know, what I hear from a lot of my clients who are lawyers and working in the city is they do love what they do, and if they could find a way to actually do it but in a more flexible way, then they certainly would. And I, you know, admit that I don't have total understanding of the whole structure of financial institutions and how they work, and I know there are some departments that, you know, are working on different markets, so need to be, you know, at your desk for certain hours and that kind of thing. But I feel, but I've had them say to me, you know, we could be more flexible, our workplaces could be more flexible, you know, the whole thing of sort of presenteeism and you know, having to be at your desk at this time and not leaving till this time, I think is getting better, but I think it's still there. And
Yeah.
for a lot of women, you know, they can work. I know myself, since I started working for myself, I can be super productive in a very short amount of time when I really set my mind to it, and when I'm, you know, when I do it at the time that feels right for me. And I know that's a luxury I've created working for myself. But I do think if we were able to look at more flexible ways of working, to embrace more working from home, and to have that sort of different flexibility, then it would make a real difference. And I think women still like going to work. I think they still like going to the office. But knowing that they've got some time, you know, to be at home where you can sort out other things or just not get dressed in the same way, you know, does make a big difference. So
But I
that's
think
what I think would be
flexibility
great
is
to.
the key. I mean, flexibility is the key. It's the key answer. You know, you asked me what did I think employers could do to try and improve the lot for women. Well, they need to be much more flexible. And funnily enough, I don't mean having their flexible work policy, because the very word policy has a suggestion of being policed. And
Rigid.
actually, very often, the policies themselves, I mean, women actually complain about the application forms feel so punitive and like they are going to be policed, and it makes them feel almost that they're going to be protective of their time because they've been asked to fill in a 20-page document about how they're going to cover every minute of the day. And of course, they're looking around, and their colleagues that don't have childcare concerns, you know, can maybe go off and have a game of squash occasionally, or can do this. You know, they've got much more seeming flexibility. But for some reason, you know, we are very, very adamant that women, when they fill in, and it does tend to, for the most part, be women, fill in flexible work applications, that they account for all their time. So it's the flexible work policies are a reinforcement of a presenteeism culture. I think it's an endorsement of that culture, when in actual fact, some of the organisations we work with on the executive coaching side, we work with loads of fashion retailers, and they don't really have the same problem with having females, mainly because they have females running things, and so women work incredibly hard, but there needs to be loads of trust.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. For me, it's about
It's
trust,
all about trust.
and having confidence in your employees. I mean, you've nurtured them and you've got them to a certain level, and you've given them the trust to have that position, and yet there doesn't seem to be the trust to allow them to do their work in the time that they're capable of doing it in. And I think, you know, I totally agree with what you say, and I've looked at different models of working, different businesses. I mean, there's I'm looking to connect with Natalie Massenet and see how, you know, she's managed it with Pret-a-Porter, because, you know, at Net-a-Porter, sorry. I mean, there's such an amazing sort of rise that's happened in certain areas of industry. And I also connect with a lot of online publishing companies. There's a company, Mind Valley, over in Malaysia, who've won Most Democratic Workplace for the last sort of 4 years. So I'm really keen to talk to them and find out, how they make it work for men and women, because we're focusing on women at the moment, but also men, when they become parents, when they become dads, they want to have a more flexible way of life. And I think if we looked at both, it would make it more easy. And you need both parties to be flexible, because that's why otherwise all the level of responsibility falls to the mother. It's always the mother who's going to be doing the school run or running home if there's a problem, if the child's sick or whatever. And actually, if we have more flexibility for both parties, then that could be shared. So it is I know it's up there. It's not where we are now, but I've got high hopes, and I feel very confident that in 10 years' time we'll be looking back at this and thinking, why didn't we get here sooner? Why didn't we do this sooner? And
well,
I think
hope it has changed in 10 years, because I have to say, as a graduate trainee at Ford 30 years ago, I really didn't think that the statistics of women on boards would be no different 30 years later. I mean, it's improved slightly, but mainly through non-exec directors, female non-exec directors. So, still only about 6% of executive directors on FTSE boards are women. So, despite the Equal Pay Act and lots of equal opportunity laws, we haven't moved on anything like as fast as I thought we would have done. And I think, you mentioning the fathers, I think it's a really important dimension. I think there's a willingness there from Generation X and Generation Y men to be much more involved in childcare than ever perhaps my dad was. And I think that needs to be harnessed. And I think organisations need to take account of that. I mean, at the moment, if it's difficult for a woman to tell them that they're pregnant and they're having 9 months to 12 months maternity leave, it's actually virtually impossible for a man just to say that they're having 2, let alone the month, 2 weeks paternity leave, let alone the month that's now, on the cards. And indeed, as of April, as you know, that there's going to be shared paternity leave. Now, that would be wonderful if people actually embraced that. And what my ideal would be, and I have actually coached a few women through this, where their partner has taken the first 2 weeks, and in one occasion, the first month of their return to work as the carer, so the partner's taken their paternity leave when they've returned to work. And that's been fantastic, because it really allows a woman to go back and feel confident that the baby is completely looked after. And the big thing it does is it really gives their partner an insight into how much trouble it is, I mean, how difficult it is. Because otherwise,
how hard it is.
How hard. Otherwise, I think and we do make a big effort in the first maternity coaching session before they've had the baby to talk about conscious co-parenting. I think it's absolutely critical that, the women that we coach are very alpha types, and there is a temptation on their part to go and actually be brilliant at home as well as they have been at work. So they become domestic goddess. And that is nice for them, because they've not had the opportunity to indulge that for years, because, they've been working so hard. And so it's very nice for them to do it. But it does cause a real problem when their husband, and they are both working, and she goes back to work, and suddenly, she's expecting him to kind of step up to the plate. And because she has essentially, often disempowered the partner by saying, that's not how you do it, and, crikey, don't you know how to make this, and let me do it, and stepping in. As a result, they tend to be pretty poor trainees, and women, that I coach that later say so often they resent the fact that they have to do all the thinking, and that their partner, they can be quite a good gopher, so they can phone up and say, we'll run out of Pampers, could you get some and bring them home? Or could you make sure we've got some formula? Or, they can do those things.
Give tasks.
But they never would have thought that they needed those things. And that is exhausting when you're trying to run a job as well. And so that joint, as I say, we call it conscious co-parenting, is something that we stress a lot in our first maternity coaching session, because we know that the way she operates, the minute the baby lands, the way she behaves is going to set the wiring and set the
Exactly, it's
precedent
setting it
for the
up for the
future. You're
future.
setting up for the
Yeah.
future big time, yeah.
And it is in the planning, and I think we should all have maternity coaching, taking us through. And I really feel that, for employees and everybody in the team, because when somebody's having a baby, it's not just affecting that individual, as you say, it's affecting their partner, but also, their partner's team at work, generally, their team at work, and it's having a big impact. And I feel if as a society we had a better understanding of managing it from a really practical point of view, then actually, corporations would benefit. They would have, much better integration. So I think what's your
Yeah.
typical sort of coaching program? I mean, in your ideal world, what's your ideal client going to say to you, Geraldine, this is how much coaching you can give my people?
Well, with executive coaching, it's different than with maternity coaching, because we have to be realistic and recognise that there are a lot of women get pregnant in organisations, and so there's a limit to how much coaching you can invest in each individual. However, one of our clients, one of the investment banks, does actually provide 10 hours of one-to-one coaching for women at a certain level, and then workshops for everybody else. And I think that's quite important too. I think as organisations, it's important to be quite inclusive about this, and now, in fact, they're very keen for us to offer, and we also provide paternity coaching, paternity webinars. So organisations are waking up to the fact that it's not, this is a social issue that needs everyone to look at it. And typically, as I say, 10 hours, and that would be 5 sessions. So we have one before, one not long after when they're still on maternity leave, and then one when they come back to work, and then one 6 months later, and then another 6 months later again. Because there is evidence that people come back to work and try and get it to work, and then about 18 months later, particularly after the second child, that's when they throw in the towel.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we also provide for organisations is tightrope coaching, which is for women that, once the kids are 5, 7 and go into school, are at school, a new set of issues comes up, and that feels a bit like a tightrope because there's a lot of demands on you. And so again, women require some kind of intervention there, a coaching, just some support. Now, that's not to say that men shouldn't also have that sort of coaching. My dream would be that men also bring to the coaching scenario more of their whole life. Whereas my experience in executive coaching is women bring their whole life to the coaching table, whereas men bring the job. So they're much more separating, compartmentalizing it than women do. So yeah, it's the other thing that I think is very important, and thankfully a lot of our clients are now agreeing to, is that we coach the manager. Because, it's all very well to coach the woman going through.
Yeah, but if she needs the support, it's all about having the support and having the understanding. So,
and in all the research that we've been involved in, one of the things that eases the transition for women is if they have a supportive manager. So if they don't have a supportive manager, that can make life very difficult. It also makes women imagine that they have to go because this is how it's going to be going forward. And what we try and encourage them to recognise is that there are some fabulously supportive managers and some that are not, and it's not forever a manager. I mean, nowadays, something like 60% of women come back to a different manager anyway.
Yeah.
And that, I'm afraid, does bring another issue, which is if you've built up a lot of credibility and a track record with one manager, and then you're on maternity leave for 9 months and you discover that that manager's moved off and someone else has come in, women do feel that they're having to start from scratch when they come back. And that's very, very difficult. So we do encourage women to stay in touch with the organisation, not excessively, but just to stay in touch, to stay in communication.
Yeah. Keep their hands in, keep the connection.
Keep the
I definitely,
open,
yeah. And I mean, obviously, looking at the bottom line for the companies that have chosen to invest and are sort of more enlightened and saying, okay, we agree in the workshops and everything else. Are you seeing the results? Are you seeing the benefits?
Well, with one of our clients, again, the investment bank that has gone and done 5 sessions, they actually went up from 70% of their women returning from maternity leave to over 90%. So there's an
Wow.
automatic, not automatic, but over time, with more of them taking maternity coaching, we
Mm.
have altered that. And now what we're keen to be able to do is track how that is in the long term, because it's all very well to help them stay for the first couple of years, but if it continues,
Yeah.
the leak, the pipeline leaks elsewhere, then, you know, we've got a problem. And so we're very keen to help organisations look at all the different parts of the pipeline. So one of the things we do is a big returning talent programme. We've become
Mm.
very well known in this area, where we actually get women who have left. Predominantly the banks have been going for this kind of program, to come back in, and we run a program for, you know, it's 3 days worth of free coaching that they get, where we help
Wow.
them to transition back in. Yeah, and I think those, or, funnily enough, the banks are doing those as CSR, you know, corporate social responsibility activities. So they're paying for this because they want to be seen to be attracting women back.
Mm.
And at the same time, we're also helping them before they get to the pregnancy with a program called Accelerate, which is to try and get to women, Gen Y women in their late 20s, who are beginning to look round and think, maybe this isn't for me. Try to have some kind of intervention at that point to try and
Yeah.
help women to,
Excuse me.
because you could be very pragmatic. You need to be very pragmatic if you want to do corporate lawyer, if you want to be a corporate lawyer, for example, and you've specialised in that. Well, that's one of the ones that has the biggest exit rate, because
Mm.
of it's quite an extreme job. Their
Mm.
hours are very extreme. The deals tend to close over weekends. And so in a way you have to think quite carefully about what aspect of the law that you want to go in if you want to continue practicing throughout. And it's the same in banking, and we help women to think about what makes them uniquely good. Because if you have a unique specialism, you're much more likely to be able to stay. You know, you
And
are
more
actually
valuable, so
securing, yeah.
you tend to be, you
Yeah.
know, better
I
received.
mean, I had one lawyer who her speciality is the right to light. So, you know, the right to light in an office, etc. It seems
Oh,
quite
wow.
a thing. But it made such a difference that she was the only expert in the company,
Mm.
and true expert, you know, that in fact she was able to call the shots more
Mm.
because of that. They needed her. So
Yeah.
that's quite important, I think, for women, is to think about how to make themselves uniquely valuable.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that, you know, as a society, we're trying to encourage people to be more individual and unique, and to really know our own individual skill sets. And I think that's very difficult when you're going into a corporate environment and you're all sort of, you know, going in one way, to actually hold your own and to hold your own uniqueness. But I think that's what does set you apart. And then there becomes, I always remember going to a marketing talk where it said, you know, create a you know, an environment of one, create a sort of model of one. So you haven't got any competition. You know, what you do is just so different to anybody else, and it's something I've always followed. And I know with my business, you know, nobody does really exactly what I do. There's similarities and things, but it's different. So, you know, I think it's a really smart way to move ahead. And also it's a very fulfilling way to move ahead, because you feel like you're bringing your whole self to the table. You feel like you're being valued for you know, for you uniquely. So I think that's something certainly to encourage. And as you say, it does start early on. You know, we have sort of careers advice at school, and then, you know, it kind of gets to a point where it sort of stops in a way.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah.
And I think really planning, really looking at the bigger picture, and getting behind what it is you want to achieve from your life, what it is you want to do, what are the things that really matter to you, and how can you incorporate all of them. Because what I see, and what my real sort of sadness is when I see really brilliant women who are loving being mothers, excuse me, but they're really not fulfilled completely. You know, they're really not fulfilled in every area of their lives. And, you know, there is an argument to step out, and it's a you know, free choice. Some women do want to be there for all of the child raising years. But I think then, even so, if we've got these great returnship programs, if we've got things where we do value women who have gone through those child raising years, because they've learned amazing skills of
Yeah,
patience and
absolutely.
delegation and multitasking. I mean, you know, if you're managing a family of two or three, you're pretty pretty smart, you know, it's not an easy task. So you've got a lot of valuable skills to then bring to the workplace in some shape or form. So,
yeah,
you know, for
I
me,
also find perspective, Lisa, that's the, you know, a big shift in a woman's perspective, and it really helps with that looking too close to the detail. I think becoming a mother lets you prioritize very quickly, and it helps you to delegate, because if you're going to delegate your child, it's your most prized possession, so in a sense you are delegating some of the care of that, and so therefore it becomes so much easier to delegate. And delegation is not always about having staff, because a lot of the women we coach aren't yet at the point where they have a team that they can delegate to. Some of them do, but you know, delegation is a sort of sideways thing as well, and sometimes even delegating back up. But that does require being quite assertive, and very often, unfortunately, I do think coming back after pregnancy, women are not at their most assertive, and what we try really hard to do is to get them to concentrate on what is uniquely good about you, so what is your USP, and they find that quite hard to articulate, but we're quite good at getting them to see, well actually, because we see so many people, we can actually see, well actually that is quite unique, you know, that combination there is actually quite a unique thing, and you need to play to that, because when you play into your strengths,
exactly,
it makes such a difference, doesn't it? I mean, it's that thing about more inspiration, less perspiration. And that's one of the ways I try to get women to focus, is to make sure that what they're doing really is fulfilling, because if it's fulfilling, then they're going to be better at it. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to go off and do things for, you know, third world countries, or it can actually be within the job that they're doing. It's finding the bit of the job that actually they feel most connected
they connect with.
Flow. Yeah. Because when you're in flow, you can do everything really quickly. And it's when you're really pushing water uphill, it just, everything feels too heavy. And you think,
wading in treacle. But I think when you're, you know, when it's coming from the heart, where it's something that you're just passionate about, there's something that you connect into, you know, it doesn't feel like work. And I've been really, you know, grateful and inspired by the women that I've talked to about this project. And for a lot of them, they're very busy, they're juggling lots of things, but they've said, oh, this is something I really connect with, this is something I'm passionate about. And so they've found space, they've found time. And I think that's the thing, is when we're passionate about something, you know, we do manage to juggle it. But another interesting thing I thought, just listening to you, is when women come back and they don't quite feel themselves, they don't quite feel ready. You know, Victoria mentioned in her research, you know, there is this 3-month period before and this 3-month period after where there's a real spike. And what they're doing now is opening up the research to see how long does that go for until it really goes back to normal. And I had a client recently who said to me, you know, it took me a year before I felt really back to myself. And in some ways I thought, well, you'll never be back to yourself because you're this new evolved person, but I know what she meant. And that's a hugely long time. I mean, she came back to work, I'm pretty sure certainly within 6 months of being off. But to then be in a role that you used to feel so comfortable in, not feeling so comfortable, is very difficult. And I still go back to, if we actually transitioned out earlier and allowed ourselves that space and that time, I do feel, you know, and I've talked to consultants about this, I've talked to the women who do, I mean, clients who get pregnant and are having babies around kind of February time, often do have this period. You know, if you're having a baby after Christmas, then often you tend to work up to Christmas, and then you have a much longer period of maternity leave. You know, than you might do at other times. And I've really seen this, and I've had women say to me, you know, it was the best thing I did, actually checking out, because I felt much more prepared, much more ready. I could allow myself to go in that process. I could allow myself to switch off and have naps and do things. And then they transition back up much more quickly. I mean, the women that have done this have all gone back to work, you know, so it's not that they've transitioned out. It's not that they've transitioned out Generally the ones that I've seen that haven't gone back to the work are the ones that work right to the very end, so that they can then have the longest period on the other side. And actually the ones who do want to go back to work tend to say, you know what, I'm going to step out a little bit sooner, I'm going to delegate over, I'm going to make sure everyone's got a handle on this, and I'll ease myself out. And then actually, they can really embrace that time and sort of step back and allow their body and mind to do what it's meant to, and then move forward.
Lisa, I'm so unused to women leaving early that I don't really have much experience of. It's really whether they actually get to hospital in time very often. And I am concerned about the sense of pride that's still spoken about with, which does feel a bit macho, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, some of it I think comes from other women, not the women themselves when they're actually pregnant. But I was told this story recently by somebody, and she was going off earlier than she'd planned, because she'd been working very hard. She got high blood pressure, and she was recommended to kind of step out a few weeks earlier. And so, because I think I work with a lot of the consultants, quite often I'll see women who have been advised for medical reasons to step out, so they wouldn't have naturally chosen that. But often they're medically advised, okay, you do need to slow down, you do need to step out, and do that. So they do that process. But actually, what I'm told is often, it's their colleagues that say, oh, well, I managed to stay until my waters broke. I was in a meeting a week before, or I was on a plane, at so-and-so. And actually, I do think that is a negative. And I think we see it with celebrities as well, that before they drop, they're out and about, and then suddenly they're back in their skinny jeans a week later. And so I think we've almost got this culture of pregnancy is something that we just do so well, and we do it very neatly and tidily, and then we oh yeah, there's a pretty baby and I'm back to looking fantastic, and off we go as if nothing's really happened.
Quite unrealistic, isn't it?
It's totally unrealistic. I mean, for somebody who works with women through that transition, who sees all the behind the scenes stuff, it's completely unrealistic. It's not real life at all. And we have this veneer, I think, of wanting to pretend everything's perfect and we all look amazing. But actually, I think if we took some of the pressure off ourselves, we would naturally shine through, and actually, we would be able to embrace what an amazing thing it is to carry a baby, to create a life, and to go through such an amazing transition, and then to come back thinking, wow, I've done something absolutely incredible, and now I'm moving forward in my life, and I'm participating in a world that's supporting my child as well, and I'm setting a great example. For me, that would be a much healthier and happier way to all evolve.
When in fact, I speak to a lot of people who hide the fact they're pregnant for about 5 months till the bonus conversations have been had.
Yep.
Or more often it's till the promotion conversation has been had, because they feel so sure that if they admit they're pregnant, that suddenly they'll come off that MD promotion list.
Exactly.
So so there's quite a lot of actually hiding the fact of pregnancy. But being pragmatic, it is, whilst the world in which they work still operates the way it does, then it's hard for me to advise otherwise, really. Because there's more than unconscious bias. There's quite a lot of bias in the system, and they know that. So it's very hard to get women to really appreciate that this is a positive thing. I mean, they get that in the sense that it's a family, but a positive thing for their work, I think it's much harder. And I do think that what you're saying is a good way of trying to convince them that, actually clicking into the right brain and not seeing it as all left brain is a good thing, and try to embrace it more. We certainly find second-time mums, I think, do leave a little bit earlier. They're more relaxed and more calm about it, and I think and certainly those that I've coached that have had 3 babies, and I've coached them through the 3rd one as well, they're so different about the pregnancy and the child. They, rather than think about, I can't wait till he fits into this 3-month thing, they're thinking, oh no, I don't want to take him out of, or her out of the baby tiny ones, because they want to try and hang on to that.
Enjoy that period.
They know, having had a couple of other kids, how quickly it goes. Whereas when it's your first child, it feels like it goes on and on and on. It just feels like endless because, you know, there's a lot of sleep deprivation. It's so new as well. And so it does feel like a long, long time. And a lot of what I think we can do is to help women see it in context and get that in perspective. And also help them see that they're not alone in experiencing it the way they are. Because I think sometimes it's very sad when you work with women who get postnatal depression because they feel, and often that's linked to perhaps birth, you know, something may have gone wrong. And they feel as if they're failing. And very often, of course, women that have been highly successful and have never failed at anything, if something goes awry and it's not quite the natural childbirth they perhaps expected, they're in shock. So sometimes I feel it's like post-traumatic stress disorder as well. You know, and it really is. It's a very difficult time, and of course that's where you come into your own because they do need much more of a hands-on approach, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, birth experience can, you know, you can have things not going in the way that you thought, but it can still be a positive birth experience. Or it can just go so off plan, and if you're somebody who's very used to being in control and having it very well managed, it can be that side of that, you know, that side of it that can be very, you know, just completely throws you off balance, and it can be very traumatic to do that. But I think, you know, listening to what you were saying as well, is it is connecting with the employers, and it is showing them that there could be another way, and actually this way could actually benefit them and their employees and their bottom line. And I think that's the important thing. You know, as much as we all want to have a happier world, you know, we've also got to pay the bills, and we've got to keep these corporations running. And I think for me, it's very much my next step is really sort of looking into companies that do it differently, and the success that they find and how it works, and seeing whether those new models can be brought in any shape or form to the more structured environments of the sort of banks and the lawyers. And if they're open to that, I mean, obviously, you know, when you've got a structure that's set there can be that sort of old boys network, and this is how we do it, and this is how we want to do it, and we don't want to move forward. So I think it takes, you know, people right at the top to change the culture, to change the way of thinking, and then it, you know, it trickles down. So.
And also can start from the bottom up. I think Gen Y, now that the economy is picking up and they're getting more confident, because obviously it was an employer's market for a long time, but now that it's becoming an employee's market, I think Gen Y, men and women, will dictate a lot of change.
This is how I want it to be.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And also we've got the baby boomers who are supposed to be retiring, but don't want to retire either because they're too fit and active at 65, and so they want to work in a different, more flexible way. So I think once working flexibly and remotely is no longer just a mum's issue, then it won't be so stigmatized. And when it becomes more the province of people at different stages of their career, and that there's a general move towards more flexible working, I think that will definitely help to retain more women.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, it's been so interesting talking to you. I could absolutely talk to you all day, but I really feel like, you know, if it comes from the top, it comes from the bottom. You know, things can change, and I'm very optimistic for change. You know, and it's been a pleasure connecting with you and learning how, you know, you and your company works. So I realised that I didn't ask for any Q&A and connecting in with our audience to see if we had any there. I didn't see anything flag up, but we will have a forum later in the week where people can pose questions if they want to ask anything. And obviously this will be going up as a replay as well. So, but thank you so much, Geraldine, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure connecting with you, and thank you for joining the conversation.
Okay, thank you.